albert.pinto as a username. Okay, so it seems it's not working for a lot of people. In that case, I have homework to do. Please. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Albert.pinto as a username. Who else did it not work for? Yeah, no one. It seems to be working.
No,
It
just
worked for you.
with a capital S.
With a capital S. Okay, guys, if it doesn't, put it on Slack and we'll have an early break. I'll just introduce the topic. We'll have an early break. Today, it turns out that what we have to do, the statement of the problem is very simple. We are going to do retrieval augmented generation. Now, retrieval augmented generation has become a huge topic. Whatever you thought you know, the state of the art has advanced a lot more. Are we together? It has become deep, it has become rich, and it has become perhaps the most practical use case other than chatbots of, and in fact, even as chatbots of AI or generative AI. It is very important, therefore, that we do and learn this properly. Are we together? Now, when we talk about retrieval augmented generation, just to whet your recollection, it is a two-stage process. In the first stage, when you get a user query, you try to find the background context. Maybe I should draw it out a little bit so that these notes are there. Please bear with me for a moment. LLM-2. That should be better. I'll draw it out. See, the way to differentiate it is to look at the traditional. Oh, sorry, what is happening? This. Okay. Look at the traditional chat. The traditional LLM chat is a user input goes in, X goes in, and what comes out, welcome. Yeah. So what comes out is response or completion. The technical word is completion. Output, or in traditional machine learning, we would just say output that comes out. Input is often called a prompt. Let's take a prompt.
Are you sharing the screen?
I am indeed not. Thank you for, again, noticing that clearly. I should be. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. So the traditional input is you have the LLM or AI, you give it an input, and this may be a chatbot, and you say something. For example, you may say, you may say something like, what is the significance, the Higgs field? Now, it so happens that Higgs field is a pretty dominant concept in theoretical physics. The reason things supposedly have weight and some things are weightless, massless, and some things have mass. For example, light is massless, and electrons and protons, they have mass, is supposed to be because of this central concept in theoretical physics called Higgs field. And so you would see a lot of mention of Higgs field, and the large language model has obviously learned about all of this. You have to remember that language models are generally aware of whatever is published on the internet. Right? But it is not aware of things that are, for example, behind in the darknet. For example, things, well, darknet is not the right word, but behind intranet walls, confidential, corporate specific documents. So this question, it would probably answer very well. You can try it. You could go to any of the chatbots, whether it is Gemini or it is OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, and you should get a pretty good answer to this question. Okay? But if I were to ask a separate question and say, given the reports on reports on soil sample. What is our outlook on drilling? Drilling for, let's say, natural gas, and the projected estimate of effort. Suppose you were to ask this, you realize that this becomes now something that it has the chatbots would have absolutely no way to answer your question, because it's talking about what is our outlook. It would say, how would I know? Right? And given the reports, or especially if you say given our investigation reports, now it becomes absolutely hard for the chatbot to answer your question. So it might just say, I can't answer it because I don't have context, which is what it has started doing. Or worst case, it may hallucinate, it may produce something. Or it will produce a very generic answer. And yet the answer exists. It exists within your system, within your intranet, within the huge corpus of documents that you have that are continuously being generated. You do have that. Right? If you look at the amount of information that you have within a company, it is not just growing, but it is growing exponentially. The easier it has become to produce information, both globally and within any particular organization, the more information seems to be coming through. Right? Today, there are lots of scientific equipments, there are teams that are drilling. And so as they bring in instrumentation reports, especially with the aid of AI, it has become particularly easy to generate pretty detailed analytical reports. And so if you ask a question like this, there are two ways to answer this. First, LLM, simple chatbot would say, I don't know, right? Or should say, I don't know. But how would you help it answer the question? What you could do is, now go back to the sort of framework we talked about, course and so forth. What is it? You need context. Right? Do you remember?
Yeah.
The objective. Do we remember what
Style, tone,
style, tone, etc. Style, tone, audience. Let's go back to that simple framework that we adopted. Or what is missing? Context is missing. Objective seems to be somewhat present. A style, tone, and audience are still again missing. But see, you're asking for some of it can be sort of inferred from this, but frankly, the style will come out of the underlying documents. Right? So, for example, if the documents that support it are very, very scientific about soil and its chemistry and so on and so forth, then the report should reflect that, and it will have a rather objective and scientific tone to it, isn't it? So some of it we can infer, but everything comes from the intranet. So that creates fundamentally a fork in the road. How do we do that? You can say there are two ways of doing it. One is, well, there are multiple ways of doing it. First, you have to pick a LLM, isn't it? You can pick, for example, a commercial LLM, right? And there, Azure and all of this, OpenAI, they'll be very happy to give you an LLM and say, okay, you take this LLM. And what you can do is, for example, you can fine tune it with your data. We have taught it only what we have taught, which is the web information, but you can further fine tune it with your data, right? Or teach it more. You can take this as a baseline and go through the same exercise that you went through and teach it. And then it could possibly answer your question. That's one approach. The second approach is, so one is that you take a commercial, you take, let's say, commercial LLM, because you feel that the commercial LLMs are quite superior. At this moment, that happens to be the truth, but I hope it doesn't stay the truth for too long. But you take that, and now people are offering you that in the Azure cloud or somewhere, you can even fine tune those LLMs. When you fine tune the LLMs, you have your own LLM. It's customized to only your need, only you can access it, and so forth. That's approach number one. Approach number two is you can take open source. Well, these LLMs are not open source, rather open weights. They rather fall short of the true open source. Many of them. You take one of them. So, for example, if you get Mistral or something like that, what you are getting is really open weights. They're saying, we'll give it to you free, and here are the weights, take it. But they're not giving you the data that went into training it and some of the experimentations that they went into that. I mean, those details are rather sparse. But let's say that you take one of these. Now, whether you take open source or open LLM, you have two further. And so I'll put it, this matrix in which you have a quadrant, right? Open source, the source, open, commercial. One is fine-tune it. The other thing that we do, obviously we talked about it, is to RAG it. Right? In other words, we say we are going to we'll take the model as is, and we are just going to, at runtime, at inference time, give it some in-context information. We'll expand the context with some things, some extra facts, so that the LLM can answer that question. Are we together? That's a basic notion of RAG. So I'll just posit that thing here. So RAG's first step is, given a query, so we'll take user input as a query. What you do is you treat it as a search query, prompt, or some variant of the prompt becomes a query. And I use the word very carefully, some variant of the prompt, not necessarily the prompt. You make it a query, you go into a search engine. Now that search engine, traditionally, I mean, the initial implementations of RAG would just talk about vector DB, semantic search, etc. But if you have been through the first bootcamp, you remember that we emphasize that it shouldn't be just that. What should it be?
Combination.
Combination. It should be a hybrid of dense and sparse search. Okay? With potentially a cross encoder at the end of it. And so then you get that query results. What do? Yes.
What is dense and sparse search?
When you do, like for example, when you use a sentence encoder, you're creating a dense vector space into which you are searching. On the other hand, when you do sparse is something like inverted index, the traditional search.
Level.
Yeah, think elastic or something like that, right? So that's your sparse. Because it's an inverted index.
Yeah.
Dictionaries are inherently, by definition.
No, I did not know what is sparse.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this term has become so common these days that even I forget to explain it sometimes. But I apologize. I should have mentioned that. Traditional search, inverted index, keyword search. Let me put it this way: a semantic versus inverted index, inverted index, or a keyword search. Keyword search. Then what you do is so query went in or prompt went in, you took it and you created a big context and you gave it an objective. Usually you give the objective or the instruction at the very end, right? And then you append, you say the query is the user part. This is the context. You explain that using this context and only this context as far as possible, answer this question. You determine how much of the world knowledge the LLM can use. So, for example, if you're in a legal situation and the answer must come from some case files, you have to tell it that the answer must come explicitly from this and from nowhere else. Right? So your own knowledge at that moment doesn't matter. So you're using an LLM not for its omniscience, but for its ability to process the facts that you give, the search results that you give, retrieved search results that you give, to understand that and use that fact to just answer the question. Right? That would be one extreme. The other extreme is you're saying, answer this using your knowledge and this additional knowledge. right? In which case you leave it pretty open to answer a question in which it isn't yet just grounded in the facts that you give.
But can you fix this to LLM? Can you tell LLM that only use these answers and no nothing else? Can you
You
restrict
can
an
do
LLM?
that. So the thing is, Prakash, here Prakash asked a very good question. Can we constrain the LLM strictly to only base it on the facts that we give? It's a little, see, broadly speaking, practically you can do that, but it won't happen in the way I've written. I've said, given a context, here's the facts, here's the prompt, right? Go answer it. The way it works is a little bit more involved. And in fact, that's exactly what I'm getting to, advanced RAG. What happens is, despite you're trying the best to tell the LLM, don't use your own knowledge.
Yeah.
It will end up using its own knowledge. In fact, and now let me introduce you to an open source project. I highly recommend you this paper, which we'll read, called Ragas. We all know what ragas are. For those of you who don't, it is it's a classical form of music in India. So a very bad way of indulging in ragas would be sa. Okay, I'll stop there. So, that would be the ragas. There's an open source project named after that. I guess it's Rag Us. It tries to create a framework to test whether your RAG system is deriving its answers from the facts that you get from search results, or is it making it up from its own knowledge? I think this project hasn't gotten sufficient attention, and I would very much like you to be aware of this. It's a serious problem. You need to know how you can know how well where your system is working. If your intention is to base your answer on the questions that you on the facts that you get, especially in legal and other domains, this is of paramount importance. Are we together? Right. So that is one paper that I want you to read. Today we'll read a couple of more papers, but that's that.
So I think
no, but let me fully answer your question. Having said that, you'll realize when you use those tools that your LLM is, if you write your RAG the way, for example, all of you who did Bootcamp 1, I pretty much read all of your prompts, got a glance at them. First of all, they were well-written prompts. They achieved the goal, namely, you guys all created a wonderful virtual instructor. Right? Kudos to you, virtual professor. Right? However, I hope you guys also noticed that it wasn't exactly doing what you asked it to do. Sometimes it would do things that was not from the video, from the text of the videos. It was making it up. That was not the intention. If you look at the scope of the project, its main mandate was to derive it from the knowledge of the videos only. So from that perspective, we have a lot of learning to do. So how do you, first is to detect when you have a problem. You have to have tools to diagnose it. One tool, and there are many tools, but one tool that we will standardize on is Ragas. Are we together? Now, I'll add it to the course portal as reading for today. The second part is now, how do you fix it? So I would like to have some ideas. You guys have all been reading about prompting and so forth. Tell me, how would you fix that?
Instructor prompt.
Instructor prompt will help you a little bit, but not quite.
Sorry, fix if you don't mind.
Suppose I pose you the problem. Make sure that the LLM bases its answer or grounds its answer only in the documents that you retrieve from the search results, but does not stray from that or use its own parametric knowledge.
Temperature, right?
You could use temperature, yes, part of it. But even if you set the temperature to 0, but by the way, that's a good answer. You can sort of control some of its creativity using that. Go ahead.
You can do a combination of ARAG. You can look at the sentences being produced.
Yes.
And do a semantic search on the existing documents you have. And if
Yeah.
it's nothing matching, then it's going out of scope.
So what Satyam is saying here is that you could do, you could look at what it produced and see whether there's evidence for that in the facts, right? In the documents that you have. But how would you know if the evidence is there?
Cosine similarity and distances, semantic search.
that may come out positive. That's actually a rather not a good instrument to capture.
That's
Anyone else? Say that again.
Being critic.
Somebody in the remote audience, please go ahead. Somebody was
Yeah,
speaking.
the answer similarity, there are ways to find out. Even ragas, as one of the metrics of ragas, has answer similarity. But like
Yes.
you mentioned, everything, it's a very dense vector, and if the context is related to the domain, they all
Yes.
come out to be positive even when they are not.
Yes.
Uh,
So okay, suppose I were to tell you that you can solve it, or I have solved this problem. Right? Suppose I were to make this tall claim that I have solved this problem, and I would also assert that not many people have figured that out. That too is true, let us say. I do see some people proposing, maybe others have also, but they don't seem to be talking too much publicly about it. But go ahead,
Yeah,
Krishna.
so I was thinking, ask the LLM without the facts and see what the answer coming. And then, basically then I know two types of answers.
Say that again. You ask
So-
the LLM.
Yeah, so first is, in the RAG, you
Okay.
collect the context,
Yeah.
relevant semantic context, and then give it to LLM, and you are getting the response, right?
Yeah.
And, don't do that. In the next step,
Yeah.
just ask the LLM your question without giving the context and see what the
What
answer is
what
like.
difference? So look at the difference between the two answers. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like look for the answer without the search results, and the answer with the search results, and see how different are the search results. So you need to go to the second phase.
Second.
Yes, sir. Guys, I'll give you a hint. What was your homework? What was your project that I gave last week?
Chain of
Multi-agent.
thoughts or something.
No, multi-agent.
multi-agent.
Multi-agent, have a validated.
One-
Exactly. And what did I also explain to you? The tree of thought.
Tree of thought.
Now, can you put these two things together?
You ask multiple LLM?
I'm asking you, and did I ever cover a paper
Yeah.
called Simulacra or something like that?
Yeah.
You did. So I'm dropping hints, guys.
Okay.
Can you connect the dots?
So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, on the spot. So we have two agents.
Yeah.
And then LLM is a fact. I guess one agent is pose the question to other agent. I'm thinking, and the other agent, I'm combining my thought where
Mhm.
one of the agent just gives whatever LLM gives,
Right.
and other agent gives a fact and get the, in addition to the fact, right? Get the
Yeah.
answer from. So
Krishna, you're getting along the right path. So I'll give you a clue. Let's give some other people, but you're very close to it. Very nice. Anyone else?
So, multi-agent, suppose we don't have the liberty to use multi-agent prompting, if the architecture is very set in stone and all that. What has helped is step back prompting, where you give examples of how you approach the answers. And in
Yeah.
the step back, one of the step back questions would be to validate if the topic of the question is present in the context, and that has actually helped quite a bit. And like, is it related to this? Is it given in the context? What is the topic of the question? Is the topic of the question present in the context? And then arrive at the original answer. So some similar kind of step back prompting, but I haven't
Yes.
really tried that.
Yes. So I'll put your word on the board. But see, what is step back? How can you connect the dots to the chain of thought or tree of thought? Isn't it a simple illustration of that? You force it into a particular logical thing. And okay, guys. So any other attempts, or should I leave you guys with the mystery for half a day? Suffice is to say that I've prepared you for the solution. If you have been doing the projects, it should have hit you.
So the tree of thought should originate from the context that you gave it, correct?
Yeah, or simplify it, Sachin. Just think chain of thoughts. And also, did I tell you that like, for example, what did you do when you did the textbook? Did you write one single prompt to generate the textbook? All of you started out with that. What did that lead to?
Or split the thing into different instructor prompts and
So start from one prompt and then go in a loop.
Go in a loop, yes, go in a loop. So guys, I'll tell you how, at least one way that I solved it, and it works mostly. In fact, it's fairly watertight for the use case that I'm solving. First thing you do is you exploit the AC. So you have to think from a theoretical perspective. What are LLMs good at? And what are LLMs not so good at? Remember, I mentioned in last week about a certain asymmetry in most of these models, AI models, between their generative ability and their discriminative ability. What did I say that last time? Come again?
Better generating.
They are better at generating or better at discriminating. Guys, throughout machine learning, discriminative abilities have always been stronger, even in the so-called generative models. You make the LLM produce something, but then you make it its own critique. You make it wear a different hat, and you say, okay, given this answer, can you prove that the fact substantiated, or there is no evidence for this statement in the facts? Right? Now you're saying, look for justifications in that. And then you say, break it down, right? Piece by identify all the parts. So you ask in 2-3 ways. You identify all the parts of the answer that is not grounded in the results that you got.
Question is, we started with the giving him the context, the dense and sparse result,
Yeah.
search result.
Search results.
Now, there is a user input or a query
Yeah.
on those contexts.
Yeah.
And then LLM came up with the answer from restricting inside that context. Now you are saying that go and do different dimension result of the same answer.
No, I'm saying you turn the LLM to change its role. You change its role.
Change its role.
And you say that you're the critique. Given this as the answer,
Given
this as a
answer
statement,
and this search
Facts.
result.
facts, right? Which part of this are supported by the search and which parts are not? So first thing you do is you ask the LLM to only base its answer on the facts. It will still miss it. It simply can't help it. It's just too full of knowledge, right? And I think some of you who are doing it, anybody who would like to confirm it, Haripriya, I think you are trying to solve similar problems. You know this, right?
Yes, absolutely. So even if it misses by, let's say, 5%, but the 5% severity level is very high.
Very
It's
high.
similar to what Kate shared, right? The Air Canada, which slightly made up the answer. It just added or, and then it caused a lawsuit. So yes.
That's right. And I hear that they're paying people a lot of money.
Chevron is also another case.
Okay, that's right. So what do you do? I would consider this a first, if you really dissect it, you will see that people thought that they could write very clever prompts and it could be watertight. It's not. And in a way, see, this is hacking versus thinking. I often call this. You can either hack and get something to work. But when you hack and get something to work, you know that it's not mathematically rigorous, or it's not nowhere near it. There can always be ways around it. And with the LLM, there are many ways around it. So what can you do? You can basically exploit known asymmetries like this. The discriminative abilities of machine learning algorithms are stronger than their generative abilities, even for LLMs. So then you create multiple, one second, Prakash. You create multiple roles for the same LLM. You're not going to different LLMs. You're just looping. See, what happens whenever you write an essay, what do? You go back and review it. You fix it, right? Or do you just write an essay in one go and you submit it? You don't do that. It is exactly that from the natural world, you're bringing it to this programmatic world. You now you wear a critique's hat, just as when you look at your own essay, you then wear a critique's hat and then you go about fixing things all over, right? And changing things. You do the same thing with the LLM. You say now, here it is, what it is. So you make it wear a couple of hats, right? And if you do it well, it will be able to ground it in the facts. You'll never have a complete watertight situation, but you can solve it. In fact, that is your project. Now, the project for this week is, and let me talk about it. It's quite simple. I want you to become familiar with the leading. So we haven't used any open source tools for the last time. Like we built our own RAG from scratch. We did the semantic search from scratch, sentence embedding. We did our RAG from scratch. It was important because you learn to build it on your own and to know that there are no mysteries when you download a RAG system from the internet. But now it is time to, like, as you go into production and you guys are doing it, it's time to use some mature open source libraries or open source systems that have become dominant in the RAG world and that have pulled in a lot of ideas. So, for example, when you take in data from the database, in a variety of databases, like 50 databases, when you take in data from different texts, from different YouTube or multimedia and so forth, you don't want to be the one shredding and writing the connectors to all of them, isn't it? So open source projects have come up that are doing an excellent job. The one that we will standardize on, and please feel free to either like it or groan at it. We'll use Llama Index. Now, the same text, which is the text of the videos, do you guys all have that file? We can reshare the file. All of you have that file, right? The set of all text. Actually, one of you, if you can post it on Slack again, or remind me the link to the, if I put it on GCP, remind me the link, I'll repost it. Take that text. It's 4 million tokens. 4 million in this world is not too much. Okay? It turns out that I have given about 360 odd lectures during the pandemic, and it is pretty much the pandemic and post-pandemic videos. Okay? So those videos is the body of the text. This time, your main project for the coming 2 weeks is, and what we'll do is we'll do this project. Right? If you don't do the project, we are almost not making progress, guys, because a lot of learning is in the project. Like, for example, today, the answer to this question that how do you box LLM in, right? If you had done the multi-agent, so from that I surmise that not many of you did the multi-agent AutoGen project. How many of you did it, by the way? Anyone who has done it?
Yeah.
Sanjay, you did it?
Yeah, I can say we did. Still a lot to go.
Still a lot to go, but you did it. Very good. Sanjay here has done it. Krishna here has been playing with it. Guys, these are not trivial things, these ideas. And what was your general impression, Sanjay and Krishna, on using AutoGen and using this multi-agent?
It actually follows the prompt well.
It follows the prompt pretty well, right? And you can really make it do things, right? Make it do very complicated things. And that is what we are learning, guys. Like these LLMs are versatile things. You can make them play different roles. You're not going to two different LLMs. You're still using the same one, but it changes personality and its a perspective, point of view instantly, isn't it? And all the time you're exploiting it's one way or the other. You're using both its generative and its discriminative ability.
Are you using instructor prompt? Are we using the instructor frameworks?
With AutoGen, yeah, you can use that. But in this particular case, if you use the AutoGen Studio, you don't have to use that too much. You just have to work with the prompts. So do that, guys. I would have expected this answer to be much more obvious to people. Yeah.
Okay,
So it's
what's the
one way or the other, it is still coming back to prompt.
It is. And of course, prompting is the new programming language. There's no doubt about that. See, guys.
Difference with Llama Index and
AutoGen. Oh, Llama Index is purely meant. It is very good at RAG. Right? We are now. These 2 weeks are for RAG. Go ahead, Sanjay.
How do you compare both?
Oh no, it uses this internally, and you can just configure it and say use this. It will do it. Right. Go ahead.
Still, my original questions is the step back prompting or the different ways of personality based prompting to LLM. but the fact is given in those output that these are,
Mhm.
so because I'm also developing one project where we have to restrict LLM to use these, let's say 10-20 result only within this 10-20. Don't
Yeah.
manufacture something on your own by a different personality.
Yeah. So Prakash's question is that he is also working on a project where there's a hard requirement that it must base its answer on the facts that you give. And so your unanswered question is?
Is that how then LLM will look as a different personality and answer that?
No, see, here's the thing. The best way to do that is to try it out. Do this project, right? Do it and see what makes it behave. You can make it do. Are we together? But it is actually not the way people are doing it. My guess is if you're doing this project, you're probably trying to just do it in one prompt, putting lots of clever constraints into it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm telling you, it will never become watertight. And I hope your experience is that it doesn't become watertight. It doesn't solve the problem. And I'm telling you that there is a solution to it. And I'm giving you all the hints to do it.
So, Asif, I have a question. So, the data set that we are trying, right, for this, which
Yeah.
is basically your lectures, the
Yes.
right? Those are not very specific, the information that cannot be obtained from outside. So, my concern is, can we add some challenging information there which it cannot find outside? Because then we'll not be able to really test the RAG architecture. So,
No, see, here is the thing.
Huh?
If you see, the hardest problem is when there is vast amount of knowledge on a topic outside and the LLM knows about, and yet you are telling it to limit itself to a small body of knowledge that you give it. So the problem that I'm giving you is actually a pretty hard problem. If I had given you a problem, let's say the oil drilling problem, you realize that if the knowledge is not outside, the RAG is almost surely going to work the way you want it to behave, isn't it? Because the answer simply doesn't exist outside. One second.
Okay.
The hard problem is, so imagine, right? LLMs have read every single AI paper. That's a fact, right?
Yes.
Now you're saying base your answer on only what Asif talked about and give evidence of your answer from code specific portions to give the answer. So see guys, the reason I want you to think and do this problem is it's not easy. You will learn many things, many advanced RAG techniques. For example, about hierarchical chunking. There is such a thing as hierarchical chunking. You will learn about that, right? You will learn about and similar things. I could give you the answer, but see, the trouble with giving the answer is giving out a solution, and then you can play with it. No solution is perfect, but let's just say it's a big improvement over what many things that I've seen people do. And I'll eventually give out what my solution is. I'm hoping you guys will come out with even better ideas, and we can all learn from each other's ideas. But the suffice is to say, it's a central problem at this moment. Many companies are facing it, and they are not trying to solve it the right way. Sanjay.
So I was just thinking about this ensemble of approaches that you have basically one approach which is Ragas plus
Yeah.
other approach.
No, Ragas is a tool. It's just a diagnostic tool.
No, I'm saying that's one approach. Plus you have the multi-agent, and then you also have a brute force where you ensure that by doing the semantic search against the result against your vectoring, taking ensemble of all of
To find something similar to that. Yeah, you could do many things, and the best way for you to do is to do it and do it within reasonable time constraints and in a scalable way. Because you have to remember that your chatbot is going to be used by many people within the company. Prakash.
Asif, sir, the question, see the example YouTube templates or YouTube your text. These are also the known items which you are discussing. what about the RAG implementation for unknown things, like which your LLM has not been taught, or LLM is
That
not-
is the easiest problem to solve, right? Suppose I have text on a subject, right? Which is let me just say that there is some completely new thing that no one has outside the company, right? You have been drilling in let's say Arctic circles, God forbid, in Alaska, and you have all sorts of soil sample data and reports on that. Nobody knows that you have been drilling. You ask a LLM, will it know the answer? It will say, to my knowledge, there is no drilling happening in Alaska. Right? I cannot answer questions on the soil sample there. So what will it do? In a RAG implementation, it will base its answers on what?
on the input
Results. So that is the easiest problem to solve, isn't it? Because you can trust the results that it is grounded in the facts you gave. Are you seeing that? That is the easiest problem. Harder problem is when it knows a lot and you're trying to tell it, don't use your knowledge. Instead, just use my facts. Albert.
So the book project that you did, right? So that was, I mean, it gave you nicely the book, but the chapters were always not coordinated with, the sections were not coordinated with the chapters, and that's similar to a problem that you're talking about here. Wasn't that?
It's sort of related. See, what Albert is bringing out that in the textbook, by the way, I should release a solution to textbook now. So the chapters that come out are not, sometimes they have overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. They tend to repeat stuff. And things like that. Now, that was one of the observations I thought you guys would learn. So how do you prevent that? And the answer to that also is the same set of techniques. And what I've been trying to tell you is that prompting is not an easy task. There are many, many ways to do it correctly. Right? And if you think about it, RAG is a prompting technique. Right? It's a continuation of that topic, all of RAG. And there is a lot
in my opinion, it's a pivot point. It's just a start. Then there are
lots of things happen, exactly. And that is advanced RAG. Whenever you look at anything that is done with so-called advanced RAG, most of that, see, I have this big folder. Every single article that's ever published on RAG, on Medium or anywhere, I immediately jump and try to read it. At the end of it, I realize that most of the articles are pretty shallow. They'll say, oh, look, you can do multimodal RAG. Oh, look, you can do all of this. See, there's some grain of truth. You guys have all done multimodality. You know that, of course, you have been doing multimodal RAG in your last bootcamp, right? People are still writing new articles on it. You can do, we talked about hierarchical chunks, right? I don't know if you remember that if you make your chunks smaller, you need to remember the larger context so that in your answer, you can use the larger context. So all of these things, lots of articles about all of that. And, one second, guys. Yeah, let me take a break to finish this. What I'm trying to tell you is read a lot about RAG. It's been moving forward. Become aware of the problems it tries to solve and it solves. But whenever you do that, at the end of it, you will realize that if you just use, for example, Llama Index, use it. But you will see at the end of it that these tools go so far. Yeah? And as people, I believe people like Haripriya who are actually using it, or Prakash, who are actually using RAG in their current work, are you using it? They're using it, right? They realize that they are practically all the hard problems remain unsolved. Is that a fair statement? Right? And what I'm trying to tell you, the reason this class is called Advanced Methods is I'm trying to tell you that you can solve it. Just reason through it. Some of it, not all of it, some of it you can solve it. Yeah? In other words, you can go further than you thought you can.
Also, basically the user input, the end user or the customer's input is also troublesome. They just throw a token and expect.
Yeah. So Prakash's statement is that the user input itself is troublesome. They just throw one keyword or something, and they expect you to produce results. And what is your recourse to that? Can I just drop a mysterious word, right? And I'll just leave that word there on the table without explaining it any further. GAT. 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 Because we'll come to it at some point. Let me just speak you into it. Does anybody know what are GATs?
It's a hybrid of a goat and a cat.
Graph attention.
Hybrid of a goat and a cat. That's a good one. Yeah.
Graph attention.
Graph attention.
Clearly that's a hallucination.
Right. Graph attention network. So guys, see, here's the thing. The technologies that you will learn, everything contributes a little in solving hard problems. Right? And our goal in this bootcamp is to learn those technologies. And whenever you see a problem, bring in all that you know to try to solve it. Right? And you will be able to make quite a dent into that. So now I will leave you. So the project is redo what you did in LLM-1, the bootcamp one. This time, in the first week, don't worry about multimodal. I mean, see, you already have the text. Don't worry about multimodality. Are we together? Next week, we will bring in multimodality. But this week, just plain text, try to do a RAG implementation with the hard constraint that it must produce evidence that it has answered the question based on the lectures and not cooked it up. Can you do that? Yeah. And when you try to do that, and if you really do that, it's really worthwhile because it's one of the core questions people are trying to answer these days. I would like you to try so that you know why it is a tough problem. Am I making sense, guys? Right? Use Llama Index, become intimately familiar with Llama Index. It seems to be one of the leading open source projects. In fact, pretty much I was going to say the open source project, but I don't want to offend the next leading open source project, whatever that is. Right? But this is, I mean, there are many, of course, called BERT. But this is also, this is one of the, is Patrick here?
So is it better than LangChain, Asif?
So the question Albert immediately asked, is it better than LangChain? See, LangChain is a larger framework that does a lot of things with LLMs. Llama Index is much more laser sharp focused on RAG-like use cases. Yeah. But yes, there is a lot of overlap. You can try LangChain if you want, but I would suggest for the sake of this project and so that you have some sense of sanity, do it with Llama Index because we are going to do LangChain anyway in a couple of weeks. Right? So hang on to it. One of the goals of this project, this bootcamp is there are 3 libraries you need to know really well. Llama Index, LangChain, and well, Instructor we have already finished, and PyTorch. You will notice that after a little while, we'll move on to creating code, actually writing a lot of network code. Building networks, fine-tuning it, taking not just downloading a pre-trained model, but chopping its head off and writing a head for it, and then fine-tuning it properly. Those are some of the things that we're going to do. Yeah. And graph neural networks, of course. We're going to do a lot of GATs, goats and cats.
Asif, I have a question. It's a little bit related to OpenAI. So there are 2 kinds of OpenAI API, right? One chat completion, and another one is completion creation. Which one is more suitable for RAG? I mean, I was even aware of this 2 kinds of APIs only very recently. And when I look back, one apparently stores the chat history.
Yeah.
And which is basically the chat completion, and which is what is widely used. Another one is for the chatbot kind of thing. Can you throw some light on these 2 types?
See, one is just think of stateless versus stateful. It's as simple as that. I mean, you use one to just get an answer and be done with. Now you move on to the next one, right? So, for example, when you're responding to RAG, it makes, at least in a very basic implementation of RAG, it just makes sense not to keep in context the last query that you answered, isn't it? Because that was from a different user in a different context. Whereas in a conversational situation, you do want to preserve and refer back to the. So, for example, you could, if your statement is, user prompt is, can you give me 3 more examples? You do that all the time in ChatGPT, isn't it? Or Gemini?
Yes.
So now isn't it obvious which is the only one you can use?
Yes, that's why I'm confused because whatever the definition says of preserving the chat history is what should not be used in RAG architecture, because you just want the answer
Yes,
for that particular query. But that is
exactly.
what is widely used everywhere. The
Yeah,
chat
I noticed that. The reason is that most people have gotten used to that one API because that API is mentioned everywhere, right? And so what happens is when you make a new query, it just creates a new session and still works because it just treats it as a new interaction session. But you do have a point. I mean, why? So guys,
Asif, I have a question. So, thinking about the approach to the solution, what part of let's say simulacras or the agents that we will engage with to solve this kind of a problem would be about solving the business case? Like, what part of the approach should we think, okay, if we are trying to solve this problem about, let's say, taxes or lawyers for a rack for law, then do we think about the business use cases? Okay, the one agent is like an expert in law, the other agent is kind of supplement to that, and then
absolutely,
the other one is
absolutely.
like a validator.
Yes, you do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you just said is literally the multi-agent kind of thinking, and what it means is that you go step by step. You don't do things in one prompt. The overall message is you do something, you get some result back, then you do something more. You make it wear another hat, do validate it, check it, tre- make it a subject matter expert, and so on and so forth, and make it reason about it. And to your problem, so what happens is that you should
Mhm.
never expose a single RAG interface to the whole company. It doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
Because you can't write a prompt that will span everybody. What you
Right.
should do is literally back it up with different APIs. I mean, different, at the end of it, the front end has different portions. One
Hmm.
for the marketers, one for the lawyers, one for the this. And the kind of RAG and the things that you put together, even
Hmm.
the data that you back it with, should be different. It shouldn't be all deriving from the same corpus. Not a very good idea.
Correct. Okay, so
So
the persona's thought process of generating those agents makes sense, at least.
yes, yes, absolutely makes sense. And that goes back to if you and again I'm going back to basics. It goes back to the fact that you should always be very audience sensitive and audience specific. If
Yeah,
you're not doing audience specific thing, you're basically creating a generic. I mean, it is worthy of a Medium article, maybe a blog. It's certainly not worthy of being productized.
right.
I beg to differ on.
Yeah, go ahead.
The reason for that is if you look at one of the new unicorns in town, it's called Glean.
Glean.
Basically, for the very first time, they're the ones who started with enterprise search.
Mhm.
They are a cutting edge example of an enterprise product, which is a RAG based system. Okay. Enterprise search, they have gone and solved out this problem that when an engineer comes and searches for something, they give it an engineering result.
Right.
When an executive comes and does it. So what I'm saying is how you achieve it, you can achieve it with a single corpus of data,
Yeah.
but with authorizations and entitlements in it.
What I'm saying is the same thing he's saying, that you slice it based on role. You slice it based.
No, it doesn't know. It doesn't know. Basically, what I'm saying is that it's an enterprise search tool, right? Like in a common world, all of us don't have a different interface to Google. We don't have a different interface to ChatGPT.
No, Satya. So let me, if I may, give you my perspective. Yeah. And your perspective certainly is right, but I would beg to differ with that. So here's my situation. See, Glean, they want to have a big enterprise market and give one product. What they are doing works. Like based on an engineering question, they can infer it's an engineer's question. It will, like you can infer sort of the audience that where I am coming to, or where it sort of it needs a different way of customizing it and is very effective. Here's a medical situation. You are creating a similar knowledge-based WebMD kind of an interface. You're catering to the common person who's suddenly broken his leg or something like that, needs an advice. That kind of an interface is of zero use to
a marketer,
to a physician doing even on the same topic, to a physician wanting to do a differential diagnosis. It does not make sense, right? Because that is not how subject matter experts. A physician is trained to think. And getting that sort of result is actually information clutter.
Okay, so what we can agree on is if the use case is different, it should be a different application.
That's what I'm saying. Okay. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I got confused with if I start building something that if I have 10 personas in the company and I need to build 10 applications, that's not going to work.
No,
use case is different.
Use cases are different for that.
Yeah.
So what you do is, if you can be very precise about the use cases, see, you may have the same interface, but if you can infer which use case I'm leading to and quickly dynamically pull in different library of prompts that you will run next to it.
I wasn't alluding to that. Like an enterprise search is an enterprise search. I look for a keyword,
that's
it should, or a semantic thing.
Yeah.
And it should come back the same way based on whoever
is asking.
Right? The use case is the same.
Yeah. So no, in that generic thing, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But
no, hang on. I'll let Prakash finish his
question. So still I am not able to finalize, though, even though let's say I have put down a prompt engineering inside the rank and make it as an advanced rank. And out of that prompt engineering, there is an answer, right?
Yeah.
Now, how I'm confident about this answer is still correct?
You can. So Prakash, I've been saying this. I'll say it once more. See, LLM, you ask it a question, right?
Where do I stop?
No, let me answer this. Process. What is the significance of the Higgs field? Right? It will come up with an answer. What is your main concern? It is not based on the search results.
No, that time I don't have a decision that is this a answer correct or approximate or what?
What do you mean? You don't have a.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is this is a system. The RAG is a system. Now, the prompt what end user has put down is a beginning question, and the result what it has got. Who is going to derive? Who is going to say that these results are correct for this question?
Yes, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. See, you cannot answer correct or incorrect because even the search results that you got, the facts that you got from your search system, may be wrong, theoretically. The question that we are trying to answer, very precisely the one that we want to answer, and I want you to think of is the answer that the LLM is giving grounded in the facts that it found in the document corpus? Can it cite it? That this I am saying because of this, this, and this. And I'm saying that part, whether it is correct or not, whether those original sources are right or wrong, I'm not, it is invariant of them. But so long as those sources are there in your document corpus, can it, for every fact that it mentions, can it give a reference to the document that supports that fact? And I'm saying the answer is yes. Right? With a very, very low error rate. Right? Negligible error rate, you can make it do that. The point is exactly that, being careful, forcing it to cite. Are we together? And the way to force it to cite is to have an interplay between two roles, its discriminative ability and its generative ability. And what I'm trying to tell is plain as day. It's something that is inherent to all of us. When we write an essay, what is the very first thing we do the moment we write the first draft? We call it a draft for a reason. Because what do? The next thing we do, we take off our creative hat and we wear our critique's hat, isn't it? We wear a copy editor's hat and then we go about looking for ways to restructure it and fix it.
So then how to get a citations of whatever each sentence is LLM has produced?
Well, you're practically asking for the solution. I'm saying, try it out, do it. Right? Do it. It can be done. Think about it this way. Okay, let me connect the dots for you. When the search results come, they are at some chunks. You know the parent chunks, the larger context they come from. From that, you also know which document they come from.
No, that is there. But the point is, because now LLM has given a persona, it has changed the output.
But it's still grounded in the facts. Right? It is saying, see, if you can literally produce a 2-column answer. See, in scientific writing, this you're taught this. You write something, immediately have references. Every 3-4 sentences have a references. If it is not your original work, if it is somebody else's work, the background you're writing, practically every sentence has a reference, right? And these days, the new, for example, Edward Tuff style of giving references is not at the end of the paper, which also you do, but literally in a second column, in the margin right there itself. So you can make an LLM do that for you.
Prakash, can I actually give a perspective here? See, in a RAG-based system, let's understand the initial is retrieval augmentation. The second one is generation. Retrieval augmentation is facts. Generation is creativity. So it will not reproduce what you got in your retrieval because you're kicking in a generative stuff. So maybe your problem that you're trying to solve is secretive. What I will at least tell you is if you don't want creativity, if you want deterministic, then you have to look at super deterministic outputs. And those might be actually code generators. You're using the wrong technique to solve a different problem. If your input is, if you see A, B, C, and the output needs to be D, then that's a deterministic thing. You don't want creativity in generative stuff. So are you sure you use, because I heard 5 of your sentences. Are you sure you want to use a generative component or you want to create a deterministic component?
I think deterministic component is what.
But when you use an LLM for a generative thing, it is going to be creative. It is going to be stochastic. It's going to come out with whatever it feels like. And then you're going to go into the business of, is it saying the right thing?
Okay.
You can get determinism with fine tuning of other models. If you see this, I want that.
Got it.
So better to use heuristic methods.
Depending on the problem you're trying to solve.
Okay, guys, do this. There's a lot of learning in this project, right? Do this, Prakash, you in particular, do this, right? And you will see that you can't make it watertight, but you can make it behave. Now, like Satyam pointed out, your use cases are somehow different, and of course, you seem not to be able to talk about it. But without knowing that, you will benefit from the techniques, I think, that I mentioned. Because I don't think you have tried that. I tried the interplay between the generative and the discriminative ability of an LLM. You should really exploit that as much as possible. Now, people have gone to a large extent. Like, for example, Haripriya alluded to the fact that some people, when they do multi-agent, they literally use different elements. They will pit response, let's say, from OpenAI against response from some open source or using a response from Cohere, and they'll bounce it against each other. And people have gone to a very, very far extent in how creatively they have tried to solve problems. We are in the world of hacking. We don't quite know all the right solutions. Right? And the landscape is evolving. I should show you my folder on that. It's this thick, filled with papers and articles. And now it was a 3-inch binder. And I thought, okay, enough. Let's go to another 3-inch binder. And after a little while, you realize that there is no end to the amount of work being done on RAGs. Why? Because it's one of the core or dominant use cases of AI. See, we talk about AI and many, many things. It's going to fly an aeroplane someday and whatnot. The reality is 2023, 2024, the dominant use case is RAG, which is why it was the foundation of your LLM-1 bootcamp. Now I'm trying to tell you, I'm revisiting the topic, but I'm saying what you did was good. You created your goal, you created a product, but it will not, you can't sell it as it is because it has problems. And those are problems that not only you, I have picked something which is a universal problem. Everybody doing RAG in one form or the other comes across this issue and they have to tackle this issue. Some places the issue is easy to tackle. For example, if I'm just doing RAG over very proprietary data, the problem is beyond easy. The LLM doesn't know about it, right? All you have to do is watch out for hallucination. So a very simple discriminative effort after that solves it. Right? If your problem is like the problem that I gave you, which is really hard, I give all my talks are on AI. There is nothing new under the sun. I don't think I have said anything in AI that is original. I'm just a teacher, isn't it? And so everything that I have said has been said before. And now the problem is hard. How do you ground it in only what I said and cite that? Yeah.
So another question. So you had made us in the last boot camp do a vector database from scratch, right? And now there are other vector database that you.
Yeah, that's a good question,
so-
Albert. I'll answer that. Just standardize on QDrive,
But
Llama and QDrive.
but what is the difference? Why can't we just do it from scratch? Because then you have more control of the vector DB, right? So
And the headache with it.
So I'll tell you guys what it
Have you
is.
used files in any other form other than one Euclidean L2? Did you try HNSW, all that kind of stuff? Do you want to deal with that headache given that you're building a higher order application?
Yeah, it's sort of, it does answer that. I'll sort of, if I more formally, I'll answer this. So see, I'll give you a bit of a history.
what about PGSD?
How about I answer that? There are whole articles on this topic, build your own versus use commercial versus this and that. So the question that was asked by Albert, actually it was a topic I was going to cover eventually, but let me cover it right now. We can take FAS, right? And by the way, FAS is not the only kid in town. There is CAP, and there are other algorithms which are beginning to do better, and the hybridization of FAS now with HNSW and so forth. So you can create your own index. And that's one alternative. The other is you can use, let's say, vector search as a service, Pinecone. You could do that. Or you could use an open source tool, like a true open source tool, like let's say QDrent or Melbius or something. These are the good ones, bigger ones. You could use that. Or the fourth one is, and if you have noticed, almost everything that has anything to do with either data or search, all those vendors are retrofitting their systems with exactly this ability, right? To the extent, for example, ChromaDB, I think when it started out doing some of this stuff, they backed by putting vector indices in SQLite. Why SQLite? Because it's in memory. And index in memory is a great thing. Obviously, there's a problem of scale and distribution, but that's a good, at least it's a good place to start. Then Postgres has put it in PG Vector. Oracle has put vector search in its database. I would be surprised if any database vendor is still hiding under the rock and hasn't done it. They all have done it. So the question therefore comes, what are the pros and cons between the four things? Using it as a service, using your own index, using an open source, right? Or using the extensions. Now, for example, Elasticsearch also gives you, right? So I can answer that, but I can first start with my personal experience. See, I got into vector search perhaps a lot earlier than most people did. This paper, Sentence Bird, goes way back, right? Even FAS, I think, came later, much later. Way back around, even before the pandemic, we're creating indices based on that. And our experience was that we had to manage the index ourselves. We could do that. It's not hard. So long as you have one index. The problems you have is, and those problems don't go away, Albert, right? For example, you have a document. If a document gets deleted, right, what is it that you remove from your index? Does it have a deletability? Yeah. Or do you have to rebuild the index? What is the cost of rebuilding the index? You have to ask yourself, my nightly job, is it going to rebuild the index or will it do vector deletions? Genuine problems that you face. Bigger problem, are you going to keep it in memory? So for example, not many people know that FAS index is sort of additive. You can do a distributed compute, merge all the indices. You need a job. You need a lot of this index management thing. But at one point that there were no choices, right? I suppose the whole vector DB thing became big only in 22, 23. End of 22, 23 became the year of the vector DBs. So that is one option. The second option is you can use Pinecone and services like that. People did come and pitch to us. They are pitching to many companies that I'm helping or giving guidance to. If you use a service like Pinecone, so long as that solves your problem, it's great. Advantage is you just have to learn the Pinecone API. Disadvantage is all you will learn is the Pinecone API and what it can do. And you'll be writing them checks. Or I don't want to pick Pinecone, the other ones, right? And now the cloud providers are giving the same service, right? Google has it in GCP. They also give you the service. And I'm sure every cloud provider gives the service. So that's the alternative number 2. And the question that you have to ask is, how much value did I get over the third option? I go and get open source thing, Melvius, QGrant, this, that, and I do a setup locally, right? ChromaDB, whatever it is. How much am I going to lose? My experience is that like using open source has proved just fine, right? It gives you all the facilities. Now, at one point, I remember that when I was doing this in the company, there always be people who come and say, "Oh no, why not just use Elasticsearch?" Then we can show through benchmarks that the results are much better. There's no doubt today that semantic search outperforms keyword search. And you should use a hybridization of the two. I had a hybrid search approach. Then came the news that Elasticsearch now gives you vector search. They put the vector also as part of the vector. Now, if you think about it, what are they doing? Given this thing, they're putting a vector. Now, the last we checked, and that was a long ago, so they must have improved. At that time, if you give it a query, it would convert it into a vector, and it would do a full index search, a full catalog search, comparison. So obviously, compared to FAS, it was horrendously slow, right? Because
when as bad as L2, right?
Come again?
Must have been as bad as L2.
Yeah, it would be as bad as L2. Actually, it was much worse because the document is stored in the shredded. The whole overhead of that was there. Yeah. So, and you have to know that vendors always take a little bit time to catch up. Yeah? The research community and open source community moves much faster, but it also is not as polished. Then comes the last one. All of these database vendors have added it. The trouble with all of them is very much like the problem with Elasticsearch, is that for them, it's not natural. You're just shoehorning it. Are we together? Right? So you're just shoehorning something that's not organic to it. So if you have to choose between commercial, like PG Vector and so forth, you have to look at your use case. If you're using it lightly, go with it. Why do you need another setup? Take your database's extension, run with it.
Whatever database you know, just use the vector on that one.
Yeah.
So it's the simplest thing.
That's right.
And honestly, I think database guys realize that vector search is an important thing. So they first got the feature.
Yeah.
But by the time we wrap up this bootcamp, it will be efficient in that database.
Right.
I understand inherent architecture is different, but at the end, if you do a FAS indexing on this thing in a completely different data store or whatever, they'll get the efficiencies back in. Right?
Yeah.
They just didn't realize until they saw
Pinecone. Yeah, they're still they're lagging behind. They're catching up quickly. So that's a vector database. So that's the commercial vendors of the traditional database. Then, if you have serious use cases, like if you're doing for RAG implementation for its own sake, which choice would you recommend? Any voices, guys? Which would you recommend? Now that I've mentioned all 4. And opinions vary. I would go with open source one, like proven one, like QGrant. Right? It's very efficient. It's very fast. It gets the job done, but it still leaves you with a maintenance headache because every open source tool that you deploy into your ecosystem comes with the cost of maintenance. I learned it the hard way. I had a backup system. My backup system was compromised, right? As in literally the hard disk walked away. And then my teaching portal collapsed, right? And then I have the embarrassment of recreating the teaching system. It's the first time it has happened in 8 years, but it did happen. It was sort of waiting to happen. I was complacent about it. So anything that you create on your own, you have the maintenance headache. You use Pinecone or any of it as a service, is their headache. Right? Those are the trade-offs always. Go ahead.
So, Asif sir,
the embedding and chunking, are there any standardization with vector databases? Like they are good with this, embedding logic or this chunking and embedding logic?
See, embedding the class, there are only there is a whole benchmark. There is a leaderboard of embedding algorithms.
Yes, MTE.
Sorry, right, and you can see some of them are instruction based, some of them are not. If you remember, we in particular covered one of those papers, instructor paper, in the last boot camp.
Right.
Right. That instruction based embedding leads to more efficient embedding because you create for the same text, you create multiple embeddings, one for search, one for question answer, and so forth. Right. So that was the idea. But if you look at the MTEB leaderboard, you will see how they are doing. There is a lot of innovation in that space.
They do this vector database quadrant or any upcoming databases. Do they have a
guys, can you give me a moment? Sorry.
5-minute break.
Yeah, let's take a 5 minutes break.
Yeah, so good, right? So now you know how it works. You know how to compare them. No, okay, let me ask you this. Did you do calculus in school?
Yes, engineering.
Yeah. But you don't use it on a day-to-day basis.
I know.
You know how it works. So now it helps you learn it.
Yes, I know.
So when you know PAL, you can compare any vector database on what the pros and cons might be because you know PAL. You know the encoder, you know PAL. So now you can actually, in your company, you can be the expert who can tell you why you should do student or a MongoDB vector or a PG vector. It doesn't go waste.
Yeah, I know.
Hi, is the portal issue resolved?
Well, hi Harpriya, this is Kate.
Yes, Kate.
Everyone's off on break. The portal's up, but it's a shell. I see the courses there, but people aren't plugged into them. Like the courses I'm in, I'm not like enrolled yet. I can log in, but that's about it.
I mean, even if you log in, you just see some random sections, right? Blank sections, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's what
Yeah,
I'm
the
seeing
data's
too.
not there.
Okay.
It's still being restored,
Okay.
but it's made progress at least. Yeah, so it's just on 5-minute break.
Well, I thought this thing was just use your own. Because they're just to train this, right? Now they are going to use it.
To be honest, when we did the last LLM, 10 of these guys were not even available.
Yes, it has changed a lot.
There was only Chroma and Pinecone. And now the Pinecone there is using what are doing. Every cloud provider is going to provide it. Every DB has it.
Postgres already has it. Many.
DB vector. What is the it's not everything.
So Postgres is DB vector.
Now has it.
So they're coming big in enterprise. They're coming with the demonstration.
We have always been a big Mongo.
Yeah.
But we've never taken on. We only use the open source.
Yeah.
Mongo gives you a nice thing, like cloud things.
Cloud one, yes.
Yeah.
I use it on my customers.
Yeah, I built a bookmarking application. Pretty nice. Thank you for all your help. Sorry, kids.
A little bit, I'm not much to. I check hackers who are unhacking the site. But a little bit.
All right, guys. All right, guys. So today actually was a simple session. I'll answer a few more questions, but the main thing is, last few sessions, we had a lot of learning to do. Today, I'm hoping it will be more action-based. You guys will actually catch up on what projects you have, use the Saturday, and get into Llama Index. Llama Index is really worth picking up. Or if you have so here's the choice I'll give you. If you look into Llama Index, if for any reason you feel this is not the open source project you want to do something else, you're most welcome to do it. But do the project within the parameters that you need to do a RAG and you need to ground it as far as possible in the facts. And how would you do that? And I already gave you an idea. It's a hard problem. You won't be able to solve it fully, but let's see how far you can go. That's that. And I would suggest that you still use the same interface. How many of you did write something with Chainlit? Remember the very first day we gave you the project to do, the lab to do with Chainlit, to write a little chat interface to the old faithful geyser like prompt with Chainlit. If you haven't, I will just put the word again here. Chainlit is it's a godsend. Very, very quickly you can create a very powerful chatbot, which is what a RAG is. At the end of it, it's a chatbot app. Right? You can create it. So use Chainlit. So one question that comes up is that if I use, let's say, Qdren versus homegrowing our own database, making my own FAS index, how much of a benefit do you get? Well, the benefit is it's simplified. Somebody has done the hard work for you. All the common use cases is taken care of. That is one. The other is between a dedicated vector database, and using a system like PG Vector or somebody else. Now, what's the trade-off? As I said, in those cases, it's been shoehorned, but they can still, if it serves your purpose, use it. If you're already on Postgres, let's say, use the ability. Till you need to install a separate vector database, dedicated vector database. Why increase your headache? Now, the differences are that the metadata search, like for example, you say search only from 2023 to 2024 documents. Let's suppose you have done it. Or in the field of biology. So now what are you doing? Think of them as metadata constraints that you want to filter on. The moment you start doing things like this, then you'll realize, and here your mileage may vary. So I'd like to hear as you play and play around with this. So on this matter, I'm not at all an expert because things are evolving so very fast. My belief, and correct me if you guys have a different experience, is that when you bring in metadata, that is, and you have such requirements, that is where systems like Qdren begin to shine. In fact, there's a research paper. This is the main thing. It has to do with how the graph stays coherent for the purposes of search. So, for example, if you look at the HNSW, which stands for Hierarchical Navigable Small Worlds Map algorithm, which Quadrant uses along with FAS. One of the constraints is that at what point your document or it becomes harder to find neighbors if it is a graph. And some of these issues Qdren handles very well. Yeah. But let me know what you guys find. That is that. Right? So today I will leave you guys with that. It's very early. I will take any questions that you guys have. RAG is a big topic. So therefore, Llama Index is a big library. It's really a big library. I would like to walk over the library a little bit carefully to give you an orientation of it. We are So you go to llamaindex.ai. This is it. I will expand this picture, which says a lot. So obviously, these days, everything is about llama, alpaca, olama, right? So llamas have become the dominant animal these days. Cats, the poor cats must be jealous. A few years ago, it used to be all cats. So now, if you look to the left, it says that, and this is the remarkable thing, the very first item, do you know, it talks about data. This question keeps coming up. You know, if in the database I have data, can I not use vector search on it? Answer to that is, yes, you can. It becomes a little bit more effective if some portion of that data also happens to be textual, right? Then you can do that. You can have your embeddings already there. You have your LLMs. You have vectors. And then evaluation aspects are there. What can we use it for? You can use it for question answer, for structured extraction, for chat, for semantic search, and nowadays the big buzzword is agents, right? So go into the for developers. When you do that, you'll realize that there are two variants of it. One is Python and one is TypeScript, JavaScript based. Right? So obviously this project is maturing and moving very fast. Right? The fact that you can actually write with JavaScript is quite a thing, because if you look at it, the two dominant languages of programming these days are Python and JavaScript. And they seem to have support for both. I personally have not played with the JavaScript version. Some of you who are gurus with JavaScript, I would love to hear your feedback on what you find it to be. My experience with Llama Index is exclusively with its Python. So pip install Llama Index, very simple. When you install it, you'll see it will install quite a bit of stuff. And there is a core framework. It has a lot of integrations with all sorts of things, vector stores. So for example, can I do my Llama Index and still use Qdrink? Yes, okay, and so forth. So you can do data loaders. So any weird kind of data, you're also allowed to create your own data loaders, very extensible as always. Is it production ready? The claim is it's production ready. Actually, I've been using it with great success. It does work well. Is it flexible and customizable? So, like, see, these are, at the end of the day, these are claims. To what extent they are true? I found them to be, like, I'm yet to hit restrictions, though sometimes the API, it takes a while to understand. Like, you know that it is there, but you have to search for it. Where is it? Right? Or how do I do that? And there's a little bit of searching involved in my experience, but your mileage may vary. They do. Actually, this point is important. They do a lot to avoid hallucination, because originally RAG came out. Two reasons. Because let's say that a LLM was trained in 2022 and you want to give it answer facts of 2024. Of course, you have to give those additional facts. That was one. The other problem was to avoid hallucination, ground it in that. And that was the topic we were discussing in the morning. You can learn more about it. Then you can go and the agent support. This is what, if you notice that I'm being very particular about this, and I'm trying to get you guys into this new mode of thinking these days, which is a lot based on agents. And obviously LangChain has good support for it and so forth. I believe some of the things they integrate literally with LangChain here. Right? So this is it, guys. You can use it. It is being used, not by small guys. It's pretty wide adoption and growing adoption. One thing that I found very good is that their tutorials, you see guides and tutorials. So guys, look at this whole vast ecosystem of information here. It really will take you 2 weeks to do this project. And I could go on talking about different aspects, but it is all there. I can walk over it, right, just to give you an overview, but it is all there. So I will in particular take this one, 12 RAG pain points and propose solutions. So look at this. It's a Medium article. And what is that? Missed content, missing the top ranked document. So those have to do with recall. You couldn't get the most relevant thing, not in context, not extracted, wrong format, etc., etc. These are all the pain points you'll hit gradually. And you can imagine that lots of people are thinking and doing things about it. So for example, if you look at this, there is a whole paper, 7 failure points when engineering a retrieval augmented generation system. Right? It's an archive paper. Good paper. Again, how about this? I make it the paper. I was going to do 2 paper readings. Maybe I'll replace one. I'll start with this. How about this in the afternoon? We do a careful discussion of this paper. This is a very easy paper. There's nothing mathematical or deep about it. It's just that people have learned a lot of things and they have thought about it quite a bit. So RAG, there's a lot of thinking on. So you can do that. Miss the top ranked document. How do you prevent that? Chunk size, was that one of the concerns we were hitting? When would you miss the particular document? In my view, see, by the way, this is a good point, but in my experience, when you make your documents hierarchical, your chunks hierarchical, not documents hierarchical, chunks hierarchical, I tend to see less of this though. So, but anyway, it discusses it. Re-ranking. Obviously, re-ranking greatly improves the performance. Yeah.
What do you mean by
See, you have a document. Let's say your vector embedding is 5 tokens. Now, let's say it's X. When people write about a topic, they may span the relevant information, maybe more or less than that X. Sometimes people stay on point for long paragraphs, like for 10 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs. The whole article is about that topic. Or sometimes people write articles in which they write short paragraph, each paragraph is and then they move to the next and the next and the next. In fact, if you use New York Times articles sometimes, and when you do this semantic chunking, as we did, I think some of you noticed that literally every sentence became its own chunk because they pack information so densely that literally there is a slight subtle drift of subject from sentence to sentence or topic to topic. So not subject, but topic from sentence to sentence. So writing styles differ. The ideal chunk size could be what your sentence embedder takes, less than or more than that. You may do chunking based on that. But even when you do it, it's somewhat arbitrary. You pick the hyperparameters like the similarity measure. That's what you were using. You remember in bootcamp when you were using. But at the end of the day, you make a choice. Do you want to go fine-grained or coarse-grained? And I'm saying you don't have to make a choice. You can do hierarchical chunking. First, do bigger logical chunks. Forget about the encoder size. Right? Once you have split it into the bigger pieces, store them in the database. Give them actual identities. Make them records in your database. Right? But you can't do sentence embedding with that. That's all right. Then you go re-chunk the chunks. Once again, based on semantic boundaries. And when you chunk the chunks, you have chunk now that will fit into your transformer, sentence encoder. But when you get that chunk, you realize that its surrounding context is missing, which will be very relevant. Isn't it? That is the problem that these people are alluding to. Or not only that, sometimes what happens is a very relevant document may not say things in such a way that any one chunk rises to the top as the most relevant answer. but that document is the most relevant document on that topic. Some people just take more words to say it. They elaborate more. Right? The teachers in particular tend to do that. So from that perspective, you can actually miss the document entirely because the chunks didn't show up in the search results. So there are issues like that, but generally hierarchical chunking is a good idea.
So it's basically chunking in big and then subsequently chunking.
Rechunking it for practical.
Then you vectorize what? Smaller?
Because that's all you can vectorize.
So then essentially the intermediates that the bigger chunk is just an intermediate step.
Yeah, it's an intermediate step. So see what happens is that, no, you don't throw it away. That's the whole point. So suppose I got a chunk C1 and C3. I look at it and I realize that I'm getting a lot of chunks from a parent P. Right? And so the whole parent document must be relevant. So then what I retrieve is the parent chunk itself.
I'm to see your writing board. Is that the case for everyone?
No, I'm not writing. I'm not. No. I'm not writing. But maybe this needs to be illustrated. What I'm trying to say. See, guys, the hierarchy is this. You have a corpus, right? Corpus of docs. Out of the corpus comes many documents: D1, D2, DK. So far, so good, right? This I'm saying when you first do your chunking, unlike what you did in the boot camp. If you remember, I just said, oh, just chunk based on the sentence encoder at that time. Because it was a learning process. And did you notice that sometimes you would miss important things? Now I'm saying, do it the right way. Don't chunk based on whatever implementation detail it is. A chunk based on the semantic boundaries, good semantic boundaries. Let them be large. Let them be, for example, 4K tokens or whatever it is, right? Big chunks. Then what do? Each of these fibrate out to chunks. C1, Ci, Cj, and Cm. Lots of chunks, millions of chunks. Right? Now you go do vector embedding of this. So you get E1, Em. You get this. Let us say that you do search on this, and Ei, Ej come up, and let's say Ek come up. You happen to notice that Ej, Ek, and Er, they all happen to belong to, let me call this level chunk, P chunks, parent chunks. So this happens to belong to P alpha, right? They belong to the parent chunk P alpha. So what does it mean? Maybe the whole parent chunk is relevant. So when you rag it, you need to put the whole parent chunk into the context. Yeah? Because there may be important things that didn't show up in the search result, but that are actually important. And if you see a lot of parent chunks of a particular document show up, then scratch your head and ask, what is my LLM's total context length? These days it's pretty vast. You might actually, if your document is not a 1,000-page document, if it is like a 20-page document, you might want to put the whole doc there.
As a prompt?
In the context of the prompt, in the context section of the prompt. By the way, don't be surprised. A lot of the prompts that I write these days, they span from 5 to 15,000 tokens.
So then in this context, this small chunk to parent chunk, you have to make a...
Yeah, somebody, please go ahead. Somebody on the remote was asking a question.
So my question is in the ranking, right? So let's say you have these lot of embeddings that show up for a lot of chunks that show up for one query. And it based on the context relevancy, you actually rank these chunks and you can set limit to how many chunks that can go into the RAG part, right? Like
that's right. You do that and see the whole pipeline is involved. You bring in the cross encoder, you do that. The more at the end of the day, right, it's how much can you afford? There are lots of technologies you can do to make it better. What's your CPU, GPU budget? You can make it better and better based on that. But yes.
So my question is the ranking that's being mentioned in the Llama index also based on the context relevancy, or
that is right.
Okay.
Yeah, ranking is always based on context relevancy. See, it's relative relevancy to be precise. All of the ranking is never absolute term. It is relative relevancy amongst the candidates, right? You see, all search happens in two stages. First, you get a candidate list, and then you re-rank and pick the best amongst them, right? So, suppose somebody says, "Give me the top 10 results." You will never retrieve from the underlying index just 10 results. You will always go, let's say, 50 or 100 results, right? Especially if you're doing both elastic and traditional and yes, you get lots of results, and then you re-rank it, and then you give to the user back the 10 if the user asks for only 10. So the ranking or the relevance that you get is, remember, it is relative relevance amongst those candidates. And this has been true. By the way, search and recommender systems are very, very closely knit. A lot of recommender systems are actually just search engines in disguise. A lot of them. To my knowledge, I think Spotify uses a lot of that strategy. Somebody told me. There was an article I read. I don't know. Was it Spotify or was it the other music service? What's the other guy? Music?
Pandora.
Pandora. That may be one of the two. So, in all these cases, you first get a candidate list and then you re-rank and then you produce it. And so relevancies are often amongst the relative to the pool of candidates. So Prakash, you have been waiting.
Yeah, so you said in this hierarchical mapping, so you have a document, you split document at a, let's say, for a simplicity paragraph level, and each paragraph has further broken down into the sentences, let's say, for simplicity. Not looking at a context of its setup. But anyway, in the previous project, we do have a parent-child relationship. So
between document and chunks, but not documents, bigger chunks to smaller chunks. And I'm saying do that. It's very effective because see, otherwise you're hostage to whatever your encoder can take. Right? You should never be implementation specific. Right? Albert?
So these vector databases, do they provide their own database or you can hook up to any database?
No, Llama Index as a framework, it allows you to plug in your vector DB. Yeah. So for example, you can plug in QRent. Within QRent, again, you have various degrees of tunability or which particular variant of the indexing that you prefer. So they will all give you this. Just like, you guys were doing FAS. If you remember, FAS is a mechanism to do high-speed search, but it still left a few degrees of freedom. It said, okay, what is your indexing strategy? Almost all of you used L2, which was bad. Some of you use, I think, Sushinder's team, the Wassersteins, they used HNSW. You also used HNSW. And the performance, the quality of results were just as good, isn't it? It's better, actually. Yeah. Okay.
So what you are saying is Llama Index provides kind of a ORM kind of layer on top, or some.
In a way, you can think about it. It becomes more like a queryable. What they're trying to do is making it accessible or democratizing it for the layman. See, guys, with the Llama Index, there's some things that are lovely. With one command, you can get the whole Llama Index set up and going. Literally, it's that easy. Yeah. Pointing it to when you read the documentation, you feel almost that, why, obviously, let me just give you the documentation. Enterprise, open source, career blog. I get lost here. Yeah, it's at the bottom, I think. Yeah, documentation, install and setup. When you look at it, you will be surprised at how well they have done things. You have that. They even tell you how to read the docs. Start a tutorial. See, let's say that you're using the OpenAI LLM. By the way, you can plug in your LLM, but let's say that you do that. What do? You point it to a directory of documents, right? You build an index out of the document, and there you go. You're already querying. You see in a few lines you're querying. Like after having done the previous boot camp, I hope you'll appreciate that this is a lot is being accomplished in these few lines. Well, let's go over it. You have a storage, a place to persist it. If you have it, you're going to add to that else storage context from default, load index from storage, right? What it is saying is that you'll have to create an index. Otherwise, if it exists, just load it. Either way, you can query it. Indexes the same index into which you were inserting. Now you can use it as a query. And there is it. What did the author do growing up? And it can give you the response.
How is this different than Ray?
Ray is a distributed compute framework. No.
No, but the storage, I mean to say, it has also as a Ray data.
See, a lot of projects are trying to overlap with each other. Ray data, though, in particular, has more, to me, it has some of the flavor of Spark.
Yeah, but Spark, this is not there.
No, it is not at all focusing on distributed computes. It's focusing on one thing and one thing alone. That's why they are moving so fast, because they have very, very clear focus. So here they go, right? The stages within RAG. So are you guys, let's look through this. Are we familiar with all these stages? We'll be loading the data. We'll be indexing the data, storing the data, querying the data, and evaluating. Have we done all of this in the previous bootcamp? No? So for you, this documentation should look like a walk in the park. Right? So, but do it, guys. Huh? Go do it properly, because you will notice that they have made a lot of the hard stuff easy. Right? And you can create chat engines and so forth and agents. So it's a pretty big system. This is it. I want to parse my documents into smaller chunks. You can, well, it's a setting. Could it be easier? Right. I want to use a different vector store. Go use a different vector store. Right. I want to retrieve more context when I query. Well, you can just say the default to return the top 5 most similar instead of 2. Right. By the way, I typically I'm spoiled. I usually ask for 25 sometimes. Context window has increased, so I'll typically.
But then more and more I see it's just a overlay API on existing.
Oh, everything is true. See,
it's not unique in a way that is providing anything.
It is not. They are not innovating. They are not innovating. What they are saying is, we'll give you good architecture and a reliable system. Right? So they take pride in putting together a really good framework to do. They don't make any claims to innovation, but they have done the job really well.
I think we are going in a direction where we give your documents, get the answers. I don't think we will building to have way more.
Yeah.
People will just give you software, right? I mean, like Llama Index, right? Dumb documents, get it working. If you've given me so much of framework, it's only one GitHub repo who says here's the open source version of it.
But if they go away, then you're screwed. Right? It's almost like you use the Google Maps, and then some new guy comes and he says these are the new. Your entire code base is gone.
Yeah. This is all in open source.
Yeah. Then you move.
Okay, guys.
You can fork and keep on.
Yeah.
But one more question is so what is the advantage as such by using Llama Index versus your own?
See, for you, there's no advantage. You have created the architecture, but you realize you took a whole boot camp to create it. And I took you through the exercise so you understand large language models and their capabilities. But think of the guy who's sitting there in the infrastructure department or QA. They want to look through all their tickets, right? So they can just take this, point it to a directory, and one kid can go tell his boss, you know what, I can search, here is, look at my lovely interface, I can search for all prior solutions to this problem. Yeah. So you don't need to know AI, you don't need to know anything about the transformer architecture. Anybody can use it. It democratizes all that. That's it. And the part that I like best, and I'm giving you guys as an exercise, please do a A/B study. When you do your RAG implementation this time, I want you to use not OpenAI, right? I want you to use, see, last time also I said don't use OpenAI. This time I'll say use OpenAI if you want to, but I want you to compare for that the difference between using OpenAI and or using Google if you want Gemini or this cloud, and using an open source model. So use Olama. I would strongly recommend, and today I would like to introduce you to Olama. How many of you have used Olama? If you have not, it is a godsend. You can keep most of your code the same and literally go on plugging different LLMs and see where you get better results and how good a result you get. Right? So use Olama, guys. It's a very good project.
Through Llama Index.
And you can use it even outside. I mean, for example, if you're doing fine tuning or any of those things, Olama is a great framework to work with. I want to use it, and we will meet our Olama again and again in this course. And I mean, there are many things, Olama, Vilama, this and that, but we will we'll certainly do Olama quite a bit. Hello, this is Asif here.
Grasshopper, call for extension 0 to
guys, it's lunchtime, 12:15, but I want to finish this. You want to stream the response back. See, many things, right? I want a chatbot. It has all of those, discover, and this part is good. YouTube has, they have a lovely YouTube. Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome.
And they have actually this thing. If you have not subscribed to it, subscribe to it. You'll see a lot of material here. See, guys, you realize that this is a pretty rich open source project. There's a lot of things to learn, which is why I'm saying for 2 weeks, you're going to do all of your RAG through this, because in practice, you'll be using it or something like this. It may not be this, but there won't be too much of a variation between this and whatever else you use. Right? The concepts are the same, the implementation details change. Right? And especially this thing like flow-wise and so forth, there are ways people have done, they have tried to simplify it down to such a level that you hardly need to write any code at all. So that's that.
Hey everyone.
And lots of documentations. Read it. Right. There's a Discord apparently. Documents, so that is constantly updating via Discord, and how you can avoid document duplication and save embeddings. Lots of things. Join text to SQL and semantic search, and so on and so forth. And I think I have mentioned all that needs to be mentioned. Right. Any questions, guys? Because today I want to keep it about doing things. We have been reading quite a few papers. Today, deliberately, I felt that you guys are all behind in doing things. Anybody who claims that they have finished all the projects? If you can't claim that, then please use today as a catch-up day. And I'll also use this time to make sure that your portal is back up. We'll have more to talk about the agents next time. And we'll cover the React paper. It's an important paper. We'll cover it also. But today, let's keep it for doing things. And of course, it has LangChain integration and so on and so forth. Any questions, guys, before we stop? Does it look simple today? But guys, you know the project. What is the project? Could somebody tell me what's the project? Part A of the project, just take all the text, that is the text of the lectures, and put it in Llama Index. You'll finish it in an hour. right? Second part, try to coerce it into only grounding it. Every response it gives into the from the text, from what has been taught. That's it. All right, guys.
Lunch for it.
Yeah, lunchtime. Lunch should be arriving soon.
Okay, so the first part is to take all that text you used originally and put it in mom index, and the second step is to
That the answers that you get, try to ensure that it only gives it from the text, not from outside, which is a little bit different problem, but I think as we go into it, you'll see what I mean. All right, guys, so I'll stop the recording. This is it. I think the lecture part is this. We may do a paper reading in the afternoon.